Well, thanks guys for first joining me here. This is Brian Anderson, Brian Shoup. Brian Shoup works in our office here, and you might have talked with him. But Brian Anderson has actually had a really good success with the program. He started the program back in November. He took a little bit of a break there for some personal reasons, but has been really running strong. In fact, he's written already $2.5 million in annuities, probably looking at a total of $3 million. And already written over $3 million in AUM. So he's had a lot of success already. So we really wanted to have Brian come on here to kind of help explain what he's done, why this process is a little bit different, and what type of success that you guys can expect that might be watching this, but also like how to conduct your meetings and that kind of thing as we're still kind of going through this COVID era. So Brian, first of all, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day.
Good to be here.
I really just kind of want to try to make this session short for everybody. So we'll just jump in if you don't mind. So
sure, go right ahead.
As far as, first of all, the marketing process, I know it's a little bit different than what people are used to. And I know you've been with us for a long time. And so you've always kind of been with me from everything that I've done, whether it worked or didn't work. But what's made this process different, or what made this successful versus other things that you've done?
Well, being in business, it's funny. I was talking with a friend of mine, a mentor of mine who retired recently, and we used to joke that you have to reinvent yourself every 5 years. At first, it was every 10 years, and then it was every 5 years. And now we joke it's every year or two, where you have to take a look at a different way of doing business. And it's kind of like spinning plates. We have our regular referral agreements or relationships with other financial professionals. We have a book of business that we use. But what's been different with this is, and you mentioned that I've been with you for a while, and you've done all of the, I've done some of the seminars that we had with the university circuit and things along those lines. And I have to give it to you or hand it to you. You stuck with it, and you tested it and you invested in it, and you've cracked the code in terms of finding the right demographic and ways to get us in front of good qualified prospects that we can help. And that's an important thing about it too, is helping folks and helping families. So I think a large part of the success is due to your trial and error, and you finally have gotten it down to the point where it's dialed in.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I know we already talked about your results, so really good results so far. But high level, what does your process look like? So, without going into the weeds too far yet, what is kind of your process? So they go through the webinar, and then after the webinar, they book an appointment with you. Then what happens from there, high level?
What happens first is, and I would emphasize this, is it's different. So you have to treat this like they're a real client or a real prospective client. And for folks that have tried other things in the past, like myself, I've done my own marketing, I've hired people, I've done a lot of different things, but you can get to a point where you believe like, geez, it's just a phone call, or it's just a an online meeting, an introduction. You really have to come ready and understand that this is a valuable prospect for you, and you're in the position to help them. So I think it's kind of like Tinkerbell. You have to believe. You have to believe that there's something behind this appointment in this email. And the process for me starts off with either a phone call or an online meeting. And basically, I'm speaking to them, thank them for attending the webinar. Typically, what I say is, generally, you probably have some questions that are in your head. I know I have some questions. So we'll probably go back and forth a little bit and see if we can, at least point you in the right direction. And then I start with asking them if they have any questions, what's on the top of their mind. And usually 9 times out of 10, they'll just pick up and run from there. And they'll start the conversation. They're doing most of the talking. And then from there, it's a little bit back and forth. If they don't respond that way, I kind of prod them along, ask them a few questions like, are you currently retired? If you're not, when are you planning on retiring? And things kind of, it's like, talking to someone, it's a casual conversation.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point that it's about the prospect, right? So it's not about you, like all your awards and that kind of stuff, or how long
Sure.
you've been in business. It's what do you want to talk about, and what do we need to talk about to help you out, versus hey, let's talk about myself, talk about fees, that kind of stuff. We don't talk about any of that in the first meeting or in this discovery call here. You are really focusing on what the prospect wants and potential pain points, right?
Well, absolutely potential pain points. And also, I come from a school of thought where if I can help someone, I'll help someone. Now, there's certain people that don't need a lot of help. They just need to push in some direction, and that's fine. But it's to both of our benefits to find that out as soon as possible,
Yep.
whether they actually need some help, and if you could help them and if they're a good fit. So yeah, the whole, going back into my credentials, certified financial planning, or, it's very, very, it's just you and me. It's down to earth, and it gets straight to the point. And you do ask them those questions about it, in that opening question. When they get to talk, it starts to come out, and then you can identify, oh, so your main concern really is you're concerned about taxes, right? I mean, or you're concerned about market volatility. It'll come out. So definitely having conversations once they identify those around those pain points, getting them to talk about it, to feel comfortable, and they're opening up. And it's kind of amazing because you've just met, but I found a rhythm with it, and in a way to have that back and forth.
So you mentioned you have a rhythm. So what does your rhythm look like, or what's different about than what our typical rhythm might be? So meaning like when we typically would meet someone in person, right? We would have our first
Right.
appointment, second appointment. Maybe not a whole lot was done in between, that kind of thing. So I think you've done some things that are a little bit different as far as the rhythm goes. So
Right.
can you kind of talk a little bit more about what your rhythm looks like?
Yeah. Well, initially, it's that initial conversation, and in some ways, I try to make it. And half the times it's an online meeting, and half the time it's a phone call. But I try to get to a point of familiarity pretty soon, pretty easily. Not pretentious, just a basic, back and forth conversation. But as things go forward, when they start to talk and give me information, I mean, don't overcomplicate it. A lot of times you can sketch things out as you're chatting, and you have enough information to go on. But typically, part of that is, okay, little conversation, identify the pain points, spend some time on those. You maybe have a question, is that something you want to you spend more time on? Do you want a solution for it? And so then the next part of that rhythm is I usually send them a questionnaire. I send them two. One's a fillable PDF. It's a little bit more detailed. The other one's a little bit more, sketchy. They can just sketch out their stuff. And I said, I never get off the phone without making another appointment for the next time for us to get together. I send them the information. 99% of the time they're getting it back to me. And a lot of times I'm getting back statements, tax returns, everything. So I don't know. I've kind of been able to transform that person-to-person interview into a pretty good opening interview. So to me, it's almost kind of the same.
Yep. So you made a good point there that instead of the typical first meeting where you're expecting the person to bring in their financials and this questionnaire, you're approaching it as far as the first meeting being a little bit different, where you're talking about what they're looking for, what they're looking to get out of this whole process, what their potential pain points are. And then you explain to them, okay, well, in order for me to see if this does, or if we can help you, then we need to get all these other documents and you need to fill out this questionnaire. So you don't ask for the questionnaire for that first call or that first introductory meeting. You are then asking for after that first call, and then setting up that, and then you're also setting up that second appointment, which if we were pre-COVID days, that would be more of your first appointment, right? You would expect them to have all that stuff.
Sure.
But we're having to do one extra meeting here before we're getting into the weeds or the details of everything.
Right. And I don't even ask them. I don't ask them for the questionnaire. I don't put pressure on them. I want them to ask me. I want them to get to, I want basically the goal of the first conversation is I want them to understand that I'm here to help them in a genuine way. I'm listening to what they're saying. We're having a genuine conversation. And then it's basically, I don't say this, but it's more or less like, do you want my help? And I don't even have to get to that point. After the end of the conversation is, look, I'm going to send you the questionnaire. There's two of them. One's quick and easy. The other one's a little bit more detailed. It would be really helpful to our next conversation if we had this information. If they've given me enough information to go on, it's almost secondarily, because it's really about the story. It's always about the story. It's not about the dots on a piece of paper and the numbers. It's about getting them to feel confident enough in a genuine way that you're there to help them. So if you can do that in the first meeting, it's over. I mean, after that, it's academic.
Perfect. So I think that might be what a lot of people might be missing, is that they're going straight for the numbers at the very beginning rather than having that conversation and building that trust in the first appointment, and then actually then moving on to seeing if you can help them, rather than, I think what a lot of people might be focused on is going straight for the numbers, like we typically would have if we did like a dinner seminar or a seminar at a college. And after that's kind of like our introductory meeting. But in this case, it's a little bit different because a webinar kind of does that, but you need a little bit more, like you've been doing. They need a little bit more to kind of gain that trust to then give you that information or give you that stuff that you're asking for.
Right. Because there's a lot that you can do in that second interview, even if you have a thumbnail sketch. So in my process, I'm showing a kind of a general idea of what we can do at retirement in terms for income. And I'm walking them through case scenarios, but it's not quite their numbers yet. I want them to get it. I want them to understand it. And then I want to take them to a place where, okay, well, this is what happens if you're going to take Social Security at 63 and hang up your 401k in a portfolio in a closet for 10 years to 62. And this is what your required minimum distribution is going to look like on top of your Social Security, on top of your pension. That's where I create the real pain in their own situation. So I think that you can cover a lot of ground and get a lot of information out to the client, not even using their numbers. Then they're curious. They're like, geez, I wonder how I look. Can you do that for me? What if you plug my numbers into that? So it's definitely, that is second or third where I pull out those numbers after I've created the pain for their own good. And then say, here's what it looks like for you. And they're like, geez, I didn't realize it looked like that.
Yeah. So help us understand that process. So after the first, this is what we call the first meeting. So after that first meeting, I know you do some things in between that first meeting and the second meeting.
Yeah.
And so kind of highlight that a bit, but then also, I think a lot of advisors would want to know, like, okay, when do you show them their stuff? Like it sounds like you show them something that high level as far as what might look like for them if we have their numbers. So you're kind of teasing them a bit like, hey, we need this stuff from you for you to see where it might fit.
Right.
And so you're saying you do that in the first meeting or you do that in the second meeting?
But you, generally speaking, by the time I get to the second meeting, I have their information or enough of their information. And what I do, so I kind of go back and forth a little. So I have a very simple, I won't even call it a spreadsheet. It's just blocks, and it shows them, at the beginning, here's what you have in savings. You told me about your wife's IRA, your 401k, over here, your 457 plan, and then your portfolio, your investment portfolio. And then if I have it, I put, life insurance down in the corner, home equity. And I just show them their stuff on one piece of paper. This is what you have, right? And I go through it, take a couple minutes. Is this right? That's about right. Yeah, you said you had an IRA. Yeah, that's about right. It's gone up, it's gone down a little bit. So I flash that to them, and it's in their mind. And I say, okay, so now they're thinking about their own situation. Then I take them on a little bit of a story, and I show them more of a general situation. And then I bring their other stuff back in.
So at what point are you doing that story with them?
The general story?
Yeah.
That's in the second meeting.
Okay, second meeting.
Yeah.
So
And the second meeting is really just, it's more pain.
Correct. So you're kind of starting to apply
And when I say
your own
pain,
stuff to them,
right.
but you're not showing them any plans or anything at that point. So you're kind of high level showing them some where they sit right now and potential pain that they have if they don't get some of these things fixed.
Correct. And depending on how the interview is going, by the time I get to the end of that in that second meeting, that general conversation, if they're nodding along and we have time and they're in sync and they're getting it, I will generally pull out a part of what they're doing and say, well, for example, what are you gonna do? What's your plan? Another good question to ask is, what's your plan for required minimum distributions? I start with the question all the time, what's your plan for income? And everyone's like, well, I've got a 401k, I've got a pension, I've got Social Security. And I'm like, that's great, but you just gave me an inventory of what you have, your stuff. How are we going to put this all together? So those are the kinds of questions I want to get them thinking. And it's totally away from product. It's all about process.
Right. Yeah.
And, take it from there. So,
so basically you're kind of outlining what they have and then asking them, do they have a process or do they have a system or a plan for that matter, as far as what they're going to do with their assets? Yeah. And you're not actually focused on the product. You're actually focused on what potential problems they might have. And then that also, by asking those questions, they're making them realize that they have a potential problem, right? Which they probably already know they have. Yeah. But they want to, you need them to tell them that, right? They need to tell themselves that that problem's there, and then you can kind of help. Then they're going to ask for that help.
Right. And so I first, I kind of want to get it, because sometimes they do have a plan. Hey, we're going to do this. We're doing this. And I just sent you this morning a case I'm working on with a spreadsheet of someone that did a lot of work, did a lot of planning on it. So what I want to do is kind of at least identify what we could do. What could we do? And I'll say, well, the first thing you could do is you could take a look at leaving your dollars in the market, leaving them in a portfolio. Second thing we could do, we could think about moving it over to a fixed account and being safe with it. The third thing we could do is maybe think about breaking this up into different chunks of money and maybe spending it over different times. So maybe we take a chunk and spend it between 65 and 70 so you can delay your Social Security. And then I get to the fourth one and say, or maybe we have an approach where we have an account that has some stability to it, maybe a principal guarantee, and we marry that up. We put it together with an investment portfolio. So I say, these are, and can you think of anything else? I mean, that's about all you can do. So then they get it. And then I just take them on a little story for each one of those. Here's what happens if it works in the market. If it goes great, great. If it doesn't, it looks like this. You could consider fixed income, but interest rates are very low right now. Then I'll show them an idea about, 3 piles of money or breaking it up. And then the fourth, we get into that kind of that 2-pile ping pong back and forth conversation. So we establish what we could do, and then we explain what they could do. And then I show them, a solution for them based on that. So it's a lot of education,
Now with the digital era though, so it gets a little bit, that's a lot of stuff, right? And it can be hard for people to consume all that. So I know you do some things in between those meetings. Can you help explain what you do in between to help people stay?
Like the personalized recap video?
Well, yeah, that's good. It's good. That's a good point, Brian. What I've been doing is using they're out there, whatever, the Camtasia or the So what I find is that repetition is your friend in these conversations. Sometimes people say, I get it. It's the third or fourth time. I go, let me take 2 minutes. I just want to go over one more time, make sure that we're on the same page. So every interview, I review what we talked about last interview. And in between those interviews, a lot of times I will do a recording of the custom presentation that I delivered to them, 2 or 3 minutes. Hey, just so you know, and I'll go through it, because I don't want them coming into the next meeting with questions in their head that they're lingering, that they might forget to ask, that they just might not be comfortable with and they don't know why. So in between the meetings, I'm sending off these little 2 or 3 minute videos of, hey, this is what we talked about last time, just so you remember. And I find that bridges the gap. They appreciate it. They can stop it. They can rewind it if they need to. But Brian, thanks for reminding me about that. It's something that goes in between.
Well, I think that's. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I think that does a couple of things for you, Brian. One, they're learning what you guys talked about, but you're also telling them what the next steps are, right? So if they do schedule that third meeting, it's not like Bob and Susie are like, all right, are we going to get closed today?
Yeah.
Well,
they're going to schedule. They're going to schedule a third meeting. I mean,
but they know kind of what to expect for that meeting, rather than coming
absolutely.
In blind, like, all right, is this where he's going to ask us for the money or not?
Yeah, and then I'll give them a little preview of the detail we're going to go into the next meeting, and they're looking forward to it. And generally, they're saying, when can we meet again? When can I get in your calendar? When are we going to do this?
But I think that little thing there is actually a major thing to what is also success. You might not know it, but I think it is a big part to what other people aren't doing that you are doing. In fact, when Brian Shoup told me about it, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll start doing it. I started doing it. Oh yeah, the means are different. I mean, people are like, yeah, we love that video. We watched it 10 times because we were trying to understand everything from the previous meetings. So we watched it 10 times. Now we understand it. And so they're that much further forward within the process. Whereas typically when my meetings earlier on, I was getting, they're just getting dragged out because they weren't retaining all that information, and the digital era just makes it harder. So I think everything you're doing is great. And so I kind of took a little bit of what you were doing.
Super.
And it's definitely helped. So after the first meeting, after the second meeting, what's kind of like, where do you get to that point where you're really asking them for that commitment?
It is, for me, I won't say overwhelming force, but it's I want to build confidence in a case. We've talked about everything. We've wrung out every opportunity or every possibility. And to be honest, when you show them, hey, we could do, market fixed, spend some money, that it just, you're constantly funneling down to the solution. And honestly, it's I'm not even going to say, because it's about helping people. It really is. You're dealing with life savings. You're dealing with people's, at a critical and sometimes, vulnerable point in their life. So I want to make sure that they arrive at this on their own. So it's very rarely me making a recommendation. We get to the point. I mean, I can't tell you, sometimes I even go past it. People say, let's do it. Or I want to do that, or that thing makes a lot of sense, or could we do that thing that we talk about? And I'm still going, So it could be the third meeting, it could be the fourth meeting, and at the end of the day, it's like, they're like, I like that. I'm like, piece of cake. The only thing left is a little bit of paperwork, and that's it.
So I know one thing that Brian Shoup has told me that you've done too is you have gotten to that point where you have asked people for commitment, though. Like, do you want to fix this problem or do you not? Instead of it being dragged on conversation. So kind of help. I think a lot of people have a hard time doing that. So there's a couple of things I know that you've done. One is, I know you try to get in front of them face to face.
Yeah.
There is a point where, you'll cross that trust barrier by hopefully getting in front of them face to face. And then sometimes it can be after the first, maybe the second meeting. So you try to do that. I know, but also I think there's something where, Brian said you have a great analogy where you're trying to just get them to just make that commitment instead of it being, do you want to fix this problem or not? And I know you have a great analogy for that.
Well, yeah. I mean, when we get to that point, it's all very, it's almost parental at a certain point in time. It's almost that kind of, where you get to a point where you have to tell one of your kids, this is good for you, you're going to do it. But that comes towards the tail end, and I want a yes or a no, and most of the times it's yes. And so the bottom line is, I say to them, okay, if not this, what are we going to do? If not this, what are you going to do? Or it just gets to a point. Sometimes people drag their feet. And I did have a conversation with Brian about one individual that I worked with for a long time. And it just got to the point where the whole thing took place in about 60 seconds. And I said, any questions? He kind of gave back, recap what we talked about. And the guy gave it back to me. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. You told me about this, shifting this over here. It gives me safety. I can be able to, have some certainty. And I go, sound pretty good? He goes, yeah, it sounds good. nothing left but the paperwork. I mean,
And
if
Brian,
you can get the client to, and so that's where all the education comes from. That's where the video comes in. I want to clean up any questions before we get to the next meeting. Send the video, they get it. We're up to speed. We're good. Yeah. Here are the next steps. So it becomes a very, very natural situation, a natural conversation about.
I think, Brian, like you had another aha moment, not to get detailed in your personal life, but
Yeah.
When you and your wife went to that doctor, he kind of walked you through, here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And you came out of that meeting being like, he closed me. So
Well,
I'm going to try this on my next meeting, see if it works.
That's very true. That's very true. And it was actually kind of an aha. It was an aha moment for me where I had a meeting with a doctor. I had to have a procedure done. And I've met with a couple of them. And I said to my spouse when we were in there, when we were leaving, she was kind of arrogant, a little bit arrogant, wasn't he? And she goes, no, she goes, no, my wife, smarter than me. All our wives are smarter than us. She goes, no, he was confident. And just the whole process of how he communicated information to me, talking, then he used a little bit of technology. And then I asked him about another doctor at a different institution. And basically he said, we're the best. I mean, we're the best at what we do. And so you're right, Brian. When I left that interview, I actually had gone directly to an interview. And I said, every single one of my clients deserves to have that feeling, that level of confidence in their decision-making process. And I'm going to give it to them. And I don't care if it's yes or no. And I have to tell you that and this is not, I'm not blowing my own horn or anything, and this is not typical, but every person that I've gotten from Vince's system has been very highly qualified. They're looking to make a solution. And I have a 100% closing ratio with everyone that I've met in person, which is, I'm just saying it's a perfect storm. If you get in front of the right person and you adjust your approach, you can help these people in a profound way and do the right job. So that is my goal. And I'm glad you brought it up, Brian, is to basically give people the confidence to be able to say, yeah, I like this guy. I like what he's talking about. I got to do something. This makes sense to me. And if you go into it with that mindset, you just,
Yeah, I think so. That brings up a good point. Like if you're kind of trying to feel them out in a way to, maybe bring up the annuity, or maybe I don't, or something like that, and you're kind of afraid to do it because you're afraid of what they might think. You have the confidence. This is what, if you want to get here, this is what you need to do. And if you want to get there, we can help you do it. And we're really good at it.
Yeah.
But this is what we need to do.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And as far as there's nothing wrong with, not that any of us are untruthful, but just tell them what's going on. They're the captain of their ship in terms of what they need to do with the rest of their life, in their savings, their income plan, and all that stuff. Tell them the status of their vehicle, their vessel. How am I doing? So in terms of, if you bring it back to if an annuity or an indexed annuity becomes part of the solution, one of the things I say is I get that out of the way. I make sure they understand it. I have a presentation, takes about 2 or 3 minutes. And I say, when I mention the word annuity, or the word annuity comes up, it has different connotations for everyone. It's one of those words where people might not have any association with it at all. Or people might say, oh yeah, an annuity. My aunt had an annuity from the electric company she worked for, paid her an income for the rest of her life. Oh, my friend told me about this annuity where the fees were terrible. All this stuff. So I just break down the conversation of annuity, and I say, you know what an annuity is? And I've got this chart, stocks on one side, cash in the middle. It's, it's available to everyone. And fixed and indexed annuities on the right-hand side. So what's an annuity? It's an asset class. It's just another place to put your money. And it has different characteristics, depending other than other asset classes. And I say, here's a fixed annuity. How does it work? Fixed rate of return, principal guarantee. Here's an indexed annuity. And I walk them through it. Variable annuities, me personally, shy away from them. I don't like the expenses. And then at the end, I'll say your pension, your Social Security, that's an annuity. So don't be afraid. Tell them what you're doing. Explain, because if you're throwing words at people that they don't get, well, what we have to do is X, move it over to an annuity. No, what we're doing is we're making a simple asset allocation decision that is aligned with exactly what you want to accomplish with a vehicle that has characteristics that match up perfectly with what you want to do.
Right.
So tell them how it works. Tell them what it is. Tell them what the solution is.
Yep.
And people appreciate it.
So just to kind of wrap things up, because I think you've done a great job and I don't want to take up more of your time, but just to kind of wrap through things here, I know it's been successful for you. I know your meeting process is great. So to try to help everybody out, what Brian's doing here is doing things a little bit differently, but it's still the same. We still have to build the trust with the client. We still have to show them how to do things. We still need to help them out. We still have to do what's in their best interest. But we do have, it might take a little bit longer to build the trust, meaning we can't go directly from webinar to go into first meeting and start, asking all these details. We still need to build the trust based on what Brian's doing here. You got to build the trust in that first meeting, build up that rapport with them. And then you can kind of start asking for a little bit more in that second meeting, then show them some stuff that you might suggest doing. And then in the third and fourth meeting, what Brian's typically doing is kind of showing different plans as far as here's what it looks like if you do it on your own. Here's kind of what it looks like if you keep doing the strategy that you're doing. Here's what it looks like if you want to change it up a little bit. Here's what happens if we do more of a strategical approach that Brian's doing. And then from there, he basically shows that with confidence. And then at the end of the day, asks if that's what they want to do. So if you want to add something to that, great. I was trying to just, sum it up.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I would add to it just, if you're considering working with Vince, the response ratio is great. We're getting in front of folks that need help, that are qualified, but treat it like it's real. Treat it like it's a real appointment, like it's a real client. Don't be lazy. And I'm saying that to myself. I over deliver. When I show up to a meeting, I've got my presentation set up 6, 7. I can bounce around. I can do whatever I want. Over deliver. And because so many people under deliver and just slap it against the wall, do your work. Don't be lazy. Show up, over deliver. And, at the end of the day, if you guys part ways, that's perfectly fine. Maybe you help someone, maybe you gave them some direction. Maybe it wasn't a fit, but if you do it right, a lot of times I think you'll find success.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a great point. I know some of the guys that we do work with, you just expect people just hand them money, and that's not good. That's not the case, especially when we're getting in front of good qualified prospects too. If we did the typical dinner seminar, some of those things, yeah, sure. Maybe we do expect some of those things, but we're dealing with people that have some issues. They're kind of feeling us out, right? That's the whole point of doing this, right? They're
Absolutely.
kind of feeling us out, seeing if they're more good fit. And you got to prove that you are a good fit for them, right? But they want to make sure that you're listening to them. They want to make sure that you are going over and beyond. And then they'll feel comfortable with giving you their life savings to work with. But if you're not doing those things,
it's a big decision, and it's an even bigger responsibility to help somebody with this. So you need to over deliver. You need to take it seriously and act like it is a referral from your best friend. And it's going to reflect on you, and show up and do the job. If you're going to do something, follow through on it. Make those little snippets, those little videos in between, because it gives them a little bit of a bridge. And if they're not a fit, it's not a problem. I've found a lot of fits. So it just, like I said, treat it like it's a real appointment. Give it 110% and you'll have success with it.
Yeah. And just to kind of come back to the very beginning, I know you've done about 2.5, 3 million in annuities now. I know 2.5, and I know there's 500 more coming. So I guess we'll give you 3. And I know you've done just over 3 million in AUM too. So I know you've had a lot of success. I know that's a really good start for the year for you.
Sure.
Working with you in the past. So I know, like this has been like really fun too, right? I'm like,
absolutely.
Like this is kind of groundbreaking in a way. And like you said, we kind of cracked the code. I kind of felt that way when I started doing it in October as well. I'm like, holy cow, this is almost too easy to get meetings like this. But, it's going to be good for people that take advantage of it. And there's going to be people that won't do so well all the time. But, if you do follow a process, you do commit yourself to the process and really try to help people out, I think it's going to go a long ways for anyone's practice. So,
yeah, I think putting the process up front, putting the client's best interest. I'm not caught up in the numbers. I'm not caught up in the production. I'm caught up in activity and meeting with people, helping them get to their goals. As compensation will take care of itself.
Yep.
I'm not a guy that charts it on the wall. I just want to make sure I do a good, and it's important. But I want to make sure I do a good job. I'm not lazy with it. And I keep their best interest in mind, and everything else will fall in place.
Well, awesome, Brian. Appreciate the business and appreciate your hard work on everything you're doing, even during, things where you got a lot going on personally.
Sure.
You're doing an awesome job. So again, appreciate it. And thanks for taking some time.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you guys. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks.